Well, that's
And we're back.
that, and we're back. So tell me that story again, because that was that. I only heard the punchline that the Cantors were our salvation.
Uh, I was recently at a meeting of cantorial and rabbinical students, this is the seminary, at the introduction to their time together, and the rabbi there was drushing that in the parsha at the end of Deuteronomy, that Moses gets a sense from God that the people are not going to listen. It's just going to happen. Um, and he said in that moment, the cantors are our salvation. Because God says, you, Moshe, are to write this shirah, this song, kenegdam, against them, to be an aid, to be a witness to them. And so it was a nice, really encapsulating of how important music is, and certainly is going to be, to bear witness of God's people.
I love that. I love that. Um, so thank you again for doing this interview. I really appreciate it. I'm inspired by your work. I loved that last Shabbat Shirah uh, uh, exposition that you gave at your synagogue. It was just it had so many like wonderful elements in it. Um, least of which is when you went right to the soul. You went right to speaking about spirit. You went right to talking about access points. And so I was very inspired that you actually carried that important message, you know, to your community with with fearlessness. I mean, like it was great. I was like, standing in your truth in that way was such a powerful inspiration for me, and and so let me hear your journey. I would be honored. Tell me where you grew up. Who were the influences in your childhood, both spiritually or Judaically, and how you eventually came to the cantorate.
So when I was in seminary, I looked around me. I saw a lot of kids who came up through normal channels, Camp Ramah, For Life, USY, all this other stuff. Um, I was a shul kid. I joined my shul when I was 5. I did everything, but I did all the religious school. Uh, but what really began to anchor me was a rigorous bar mitzvah training. Probably the person who is most responsible for me being a cantor today is a man named Danny Goldfarb. Danny was the bar mitzvah tutor in the time I was there, and he tutored us. He tutored us all for a year, once a week. But we had what was called Danny's class. In Danny's class, you had to be in shul from the beginning of your 7th grade year, or 9 months before your bar mitzvah, whichever came first. And you had to be there every week. And you had to be there every week, barring sickness or vacation. Everything else, you had to be there. And you had to be there at 9:29, not 9:30, not 9:31, 9:29. Because he was going to gather you at 9:29 and then bring you into wherever we were going at 9:30. If you came at 9:31, he would say, "Why were you late?" And we would say, "Oh, my parents were they woke up late." And he would tell you, "Get them up earlier." This is a man who teaches middle school now, and his policy was if you didn't turn in, or that maybe freshmen in high school, if you didn't turn in one assignment, you failed the quarter. And parents would come in and they'd say, "What are you doing? What are you doing? My kid needs to go to college." And he'd say, "Look, I'm trying to teach your kids responsibility. Do you want them to learn now, or when they're in a car, or when they're with their girlfriends, or when they're out making other important decisions. So we had to be there at 9:29, and we would be in shul every week. 2/3 of the time we had a place in the front part of the shul. It was a conservative synagogue, and we were watched like a hawk. And we could only go out at very specific times. And Danny would say, "You think I don't hear you, but I do hear you when you're speaking." He said, "I can hear everything." And he always says, "I think he had eyes in the back of his head." This was back in the day when, no, I'll tell you. So we had,
where was this, by the way? Where was this?
When was this?
Where?
I grew up at the Gudas Achim congregation in Alexandria, Virginia, not a half hour from here. I'm in Maryland. And so Dan would take us for 2/3 of the time we'd be in shul, and the other third of the time either during Shacharit or the Torah service, or for a sermon in Musaf, depending. He would take us into his class. We would be there. He was very big on respecting each other. If you had a bar mitzvah your next week, you'd read your Haftorah. But the main thing is he would teach there. This was back in the days where if you were like the kids who were acting up, he would throw over his shoulder, and they would be the Torah as they walked around. You take the siddur and kiss.
That is funny.
So, a slightly different era. But the main thing is that he did, other than teach us, and it was very, he was the authority, was that we had chavruta, and we learned from each other. So he took half the class. Sometimes he divided by gender, sometimes not. I think usually he would divide by gender. But he taught everybody. So he would say, who knows Aleinu? Raise our hands. Go take, Michael to learn Aleinu. And you would teach other kids, for 20 minutes, and then you'd switch out. So it would be like 40 minutes total, 45 minutes. The effect of this whole program was that it produced a minimum of every kid of the 10 to 15 b'nai mitzvah we had per year, sometimes more. Every kid would do Musaf, almost all the Torah reading, Haftorah, Friday, and some portion of Friday night. There was high literacy coming out of it. It is the only reason that for this, plus an hour a week lessons, I did the entire service, top to bottom, Friday night, Saturday morning, Sukkot de Zimra. It was slightly cut, but Brachot de Shachar, from the beginning to the end of the service, all the laning, everything. Which gave me the skills that allowed me to be who I am today. I still teach some of the nusach that I learned. And by the way, the great thing about that model too was that people came back after their bar mitzvah to be part of Danny's class. We had adult and teen mentors who would be sitting in the rows with us, keeping us on the right page, keeping us in the davening. So there was a little, it wasn't everybody, but we had some intergenerational, or at least, high school. We had high schoolers coming back even through age 16.
That's very unusual.
It was very unusual, and it is the benefit. It is the thing I always am wrestling with now that I work at a gigantic shul, and I want to give kids, at least at the very least, a ground familiarity, so that it can be shigura b'fihem. It can be, the words can be in their mouths, and that they can have that. And with 80 b'nai mitzvah a year, that's a challenge. So that's it. That was number one. This Danny's class. And they kept calling me back to read Ruth, read this, lead Shacharit, lead this, lead that. That was big.
How did that...
I went off to...
Yeah, I was going to say, what an incredible experience. You said that it gave you the skill set and a strong foundation that enabled you to do what you're doing today. And what else sort of, in looking back, do you think that experience provided you, apart from the like you said, getting the words up and running in your mouth, getting the lush and clean, having the nusach, the traditional music, part of your psyche. What other pieces did you learn from that experience?
From that experience, I began to feel at home in shul. It's something that, I felt like I owned the place. I knew the crannies. I was welcome as a leader, even at 14, 15. And that was a big piece of it. Is really to feel valued and at home. And yeah, I think that's the main. That was it. The real familiarity and at home in the Siddur and at home in the shul.
Well,
That was those at that point in my life. Those were the main things.
Home is like a huge thing. So you really got a sense that this was your extended family.
I still go back. The people in my shul have seen me since I was 5 years old. This little kid running up and down singing the Shamru at the top of his lungs, and I felt nurtured by the shul. When I graduated the seminary, I gave a dvar. I spoke to them and told them about how supported I had felt by this community, and my bracha for them, my blessing for them, is that there should be more, that there should be more children who are taken under someone's wing and made feel like they are at home in the shul, that their voice matters, that they can be given the skills to pray, to be part of something greater than themselves, and that they can take that and go off and give that to somebody else. So that was my drush to them.
That's a great drush. That's a great drush, Your life, on your journey that you followed to get to where you are today and to do the work that you're now doing. It's wonderful to hear that.
Yeah. So that was the first piece. And I ended up I chose between Brandeis and William and Mary. I ended up going to William and Mary, which is a wonderful liberal arts school in Virginia.
I know it.
It felt more like home. Even if I was thinking, I'm out of high school, I want to do something Jewish. I had started to keep kosher in the home after USY. Even though I did USY pilgrimage, but other than that, I was not so USY. I was doing theater all the time.
Wait a second. Don't step away from that. Let's go back. So the shul gave you all of those wonderful experiences. You just hinted at theater. Did you when did that start? When did your music start in your life? You're frozen on my screen. Better. I'm so sorry. By the way, let me say in advance, should Skype Wi-Fi should FaceTime and the Wi-Fi not work, I'll phone you back or I'll get back to you, and so
we'll figure it out.
Thank you.
So another piece certainly of my musical development is that I was a cellist since the time I was 10. And so that I was between my high school career, other than doing academic stuff, was cello and theater. And it was actually my excuse not to do tech theater that I was going to shul on the weekend. So, everyone was slaving away. I'm like, I'm going to shul. I'm always going to shul. But a fair amount of the time, I was in shul. I did every show from, fall, winter, and spring, from the 9th grade spring until I got out of high school.
Wow.
So that was, the performing part of me was big. And I was doing, Shakespeare camp in the summer and cello camp and, this theater, that theater thing.
Did that shape your love of, as we are as cantors, the conduit through which this highest expression gets uttered to the world, this great tradition? How did your work what was it? Who were the people who shaped your work during that time? And what did you love about it?
So, recently I did theater all through high school, and then I did it, periodically in college during the winter time. And I didn't think after I became a chazan that I'd get to do theater again. Last year, the director of the music director of the church across the street comes to me and says, we want to do Joseph at the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, and we want to do it with your shul. I'm like, this is amazing. Theater has always been the thing about. I've always been interested in the intersection of theater and shul. As I said in the thing that you probably watched. I think that the Siddur is sort of the script for the role that each of us were born to play. Even if we interpret it differently, Olivier's Hamlet is different from Branna's Hamlet, is different from Gielgud's Hamlet, etc. So I've always been interested in that, and I use that a lot to this very day. When kids come into my office, I see them, 3 to 5 times before their B'nai Mitzvah. There's 80 of them a year, so it's a lot. But I try to bring them through what we are trying to become in the liturgy, what we are trying to be enacted to, entrained into. So we'll talk about, they'll start singing to me, and I'll be like, whoa, let's back up. Read the English for me for just a second. And I'm like, and so we'll talk, and they'll be like, there is no one like you. Like, yes, there's wow, huh. Now, have you noticed that the music is kind of regal there? It's big, right? This is a big thing. This is an enthronement, right? Or and we'll talk about, if it's a sports fan, we're like, who's the best? I'll know probably because I'll ask them about it. Who's the best player for the Nats, the national team? Like, oh yeah, Bryce Harper's amazing. What's so amazing about him? He's the best hitter. He's the future of the team. I'll be like, yes, Ein Kamohu. There's no one like him. The same passion with which you're describing this amazing baseball player, this is how people felt about God, right? They were alive. They were breathing. They were, not dead. Their kids weren't dying for immortality, or things were amazing. They were in this state of radical amazement about life. That's what Ein Kamocha. So if you could think about Bryce Harper, even the same passion that you would think about any fan person who goes and starts a podcast about something. God was at podcast worthy worship, for the people who wrote the Siddur. So when we do Ein Kamocha, let's bring a little more of that to it. So I try to get them inside the heads, inside of who's writing this stuff. Same thing with the other big image I used is I need a new one, but it's the Lion King. When we get to Shema Yisrael, I'm like, do you remember the Lion King, the beginning? They're like, yeah. Remember when they hold Simba up? And they're like, oh yeah. I think this moment is a little like the Lion King, because if the Torah is Simba, that makes us, they usually can't remember the name of the monkey. They're like, it makes us Rafiki? Yes, Rafiki. And we're on the rock. Yeah, Pride Rock, and that makes them, everyone in the congregation, the animals? Yeah, it's like the animals. But I will tell you, and this is kind of let them in the secret, that secretly this Siddur has been a play. We have been doing a play every single week, and you actually know what that play is. Now, let's give let's take an example, a possibility. That this raised bima is like a mount, it's like some sort of mountain. What famous mountains might we experiment with that might be the mountain it is? So sometimes they say, one kid said Mount Moriah. I'm like, that's good. I don't think there's an offering of Isaac on here, but that would be a good one. What's another one that may be possible? And let's say they get to Mount Sinai. All right, let's run with that. So if this is Mount Sinai, what could we be getting from the Ark? The Ten Commandments. Or the Torah. Yes. So if we're in Mount Sinai, and we're getting the Ten Commandments, what does that make us? Click, 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 click. Moses. Right. So if we're Moses, we're getting the Ten Commandments, and we're on an elevated bima, which is Mount Sinai. Who is out there? It's the people of Israel. Right? We've been doing a play for thousands of years. It's the same play. It's just different every time because we're different every time. Now, here is your dramatic decision. Is this allowed? How should this Shema be sung? Because what does it mean? Shema Yisrael, Hear O Israel. And we really theatrically make decisions in that moment. I give it to the kids. Some of them like to do the big, they figure, it should be big, right? Because they should hear it. It's Shema. So I try to bring out of them a little more of the what's my motivation, So some of them do the big Shema Yisrael, and some of them even opt to do the small one because you have to work a lot harder to hear a slower Shema Yisrael. It's just like teachers. If teachers want to be heard, sometimes instead of yelling at kids, if you say very softly what you want to say, more people might listen. So my theater experience informs a lot of what I do.
That was great.
End clip. There you go. You can just put that up.
Yes. I was thinking the same thing. But, wow. Context, access points, getting so talk to me, just explore this for a minute because we jumped there. That was so great. Um,
I can also talk slower.
no, it's nothing about your speed. A couple of things came up, and I'm wondering which direction to take. Um, when you make those connections with them, and they go along the ride with you, and they sense what you're saying, and let's say they try this on, and before their bar bat mitzvah they get to that place, how is that experience different than, let's say, those that don't? What I'm really asking for is, if the difference, not to besmirch the standing of a bar mitzvah tutor versus a cantor, but you're actually taking people on a spiritual journey. You're not just informing, this is the Hebrew, this is the music, this is when you say it. You're really going quite deep. And so, what do you find in your work has been like the most positive outcome of that which you do, particularly for the B'nai Mitzvah?
I think that the growing part of my cantor is following up through the outcomes of not just me trying to give them everything that's spiritual that I really care about. I know that the low hanging fruit of this is that the moment, I like to spend a lot of time with them, because the moment of davening goes from, I feel uncomfortable here to I feel empowered here. That's the minimum, and I'm trying to give them ownership over that moment. I'm always interested in the spiritual lives of kids, because I don't know or expect that the things that turn me on about, the mercy of God or the judgment of God or who God is, turn them on in the same way as those questions do me. That's my real growing. I think my real growing edge is figuring out how to translate the spiritual stuff that animates me into stuff that animates them. As in terms of the issue with my shul is, I see them there are 80 of them. I see them a little bit, and then I see them in the moment of davening, and I hear them speak. There was a child last week who spoke about God and about when bad things happen to good people, and how you can appreciate the wonderful things that you do have. And this is a kid who has epilepsy, and who has a beautiful voice, incidentally, and who is a very spiritual kid. So I hear a little, because whenever I teach them, actually, I feel like I'm always teaching Torah. I see them 6 months before their bar mitzvah, and we look actually at pictures of ancient archaeology to see, what does this thing in my Torah portion look like? How is it actually relevant to my life? But I get to see little bits and try afterwards to nurture personal relationships. But there's so much work to be done. It's so we need like a Baltimore Academy of people who can have the same nurturing relationships that give spiritual content that I got to make me the spiritual person I am today. So that's that's the big struggle. Seems a little bit like what this video project is about. So.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great. Well, just coming into contact with that which you just expressed so beautifully a few minutes ago is inspiring. Me. I could only imagine them to really to keep knocking on that door for themselves. To find their own reasons for reattaching themselves. Tell me about your concept. I know we're not getting back to, and I usually don't jump around as much, but I'm so curious as to what is it that lights you up. You talked about the merciful God. You talked about etc. etc. Talk to me about those ideas, and what is it in those pieces that light you up?
So I think it's much of a question as why do I care about God? I think I was always looking for another piece of myself growing up. I was finding it in shul. I was finding it in music. And when I went to college, I was, there was some really nice Orthodox outreach. I was hanging out with those guys. I wasn't going to go to yeshiva, but I was going to learn and learn about, deep fundamental life questions. And I was like, I was between the third and fourth son. I was between the simple son and the son who didn't know how to ask. Because I had a longing, but I didn't, and I kind of knew from words I was saying that I didn't understand. But I was between the Tam and She'enu Yodea Lisho. I was between the third and fourth son. And so when I went to, there are sort of two pieces to them. The main piece, when I went to, and actually one of these pieces, just bracket this, one of these pieces, I will tell you, I can't, this is not for, it won't be for video. So one of the pieces is that I went to Austria. I got offered my first high holiday job when I was 20. This is one of these, much personal, people call it coincidence. My girlfriend says there's no coincidences. I agree with her. This mashpia, this hashgacha party that happened, that I saw for me. Only so much of the hashgacha do we get to see, but I saw this for me. That later I saw it. But I was leading Kiddush at a Hillel Shabbat at some conservative shul, and I led Kiddush and I led Aleinu, and I led Kiddush and Yigdal. And then afterwards, when we were schmoozing, they're like, "Do you want to be our cantor?" I had always been. It was always a backup. It was always a backup. And I was like, it was always a backup. But it was always a backup. So, okay. So I did it. I went to Austria to study voice and to get away and learn a new language and get independent and go study somewhere. And God sent me. I didn't know it was God then, to a particular voice teacher, and named Paulette. And Paulette was the most loving person I had ever met in my entire life. And she talked about that. She spoke about singing as this gift from God, and that the lessons that we learn from singing are the lessons that can animate our entire lives. That we pay attention to each tone like it's a baby. And she would tell us, "Felly, don't drop the baby, just stay with it." And of really when we choose things in our life, choosing from the root of love rather than the root of fear. That when we sing and put something out into the world, that we just like we give in love and don't always get or have to expect something in return, that it's like love is like a bird, it goes off. That's love. And that it is a real gift and a loving practice to sing. And and she made me feel, I'm gonna tear up on this. I always tear up telling this story. She made me feel very special, like I had a special place in this world to do something. And I started to lay tefillin in the middle of, this preacher's daughter who's an opera singer and I started to lay tefillin, and I'm going at the same time. I'm davening in Zulzer Shul, in the Zeitenstein Gasse, where they still do, his music, from now, they have a traditional chazan and choir, and that was just nice. But so that began to animate my spiritual desires, and they were still unformed. And then so by the time I got to the end of college, I called people who were doing Cantor and opera stuff, and they had to make compromises on their spiritual lives that were rather significant, and I wanted, even I was still like resistant to the end, but I discovered that in my heart of hearts, I wanted, things that the Cantor had valued. I wanted a family life. I wanted the opportunity to give my Judaism a real chance to be something. I wanted more stability than a crazy career in music would offer me. And so I took a jump, and then the job became me as time went on. I first applied to be an English teacher in Austria, so I could go back and study with Paulette. She had the message. But that didn't work out until 2 months into seminary, into my year in Israel. They're like, you can come. You're an alternate, so you can come now. I'm like, no, too late. So that was the first piece, that I had a desire for a real Jewish life that was spiritual, and this began to animate me. And I had a lot of teachers that helped me. The second piece, which is not on video, is that I joined I was 280 pounds, and I joined a 12-step program. And that really framed what God could do and be in my life. I had no idea. I was like, I didn't have a lot of clarity early on. But the idea that God could help me and could relieve me of some of the things that were paining me was really big. And I began to, I could talk more to God. We could talk like this. I could get a message from God. I had a relationship with God. It looked a lot more like Christians' relationship with God, but I had one. I had a little more Navi kind of relationship. And that has continued to be me in a big way. And one of the greatest gifts I ever got was in Israel was the Hebrew language. That my davening language became a language of my expression, so that when I said, "V'tara libeinu l'Odecha v'yemed," אני הייתי יכול להמשיך בעברית, וזה לא היה מרחק בין מה שביטאתי. There was no distance from what I was expressing and what was in my heart. It was just me.
Yes.
So that's harder to capture on a video that's public, because it's an anonymous 12-step program. But the piece with my voice teacher was very important, and that's continued to inform the way I think about what I do to this day.
That expression, "you had me at hello." Yeah, well, anytime you go to a space of love, I show up, because that's, I cometh from the same mold. That was beautiful. That was, whoa, whew. It sounds like that as deep as you go intellectually, when you go to that intangible space of love, that equally informs not only your art, your soul as you pray, but your entire life. In other words, that experience seems to have really been so transformative. Do you, for example, there is a time that that when the job becomes a job, I remind myself of what it is that is most meaningful, and for me to create in the world. And for me, it's love. And I could say that unquestionably, because when I'm in that space, there's no ego that prevents me from showing up honestly. There's no need to defend. And, I really believe, and I'll stop my soliloquy here because I really want to hear your thinking and your life. But after interviewing almost 100 people for the last year and a half, for the people that are moving forward to reimagine Judaism, I believe it's going to be finding the language that creates what they call in relational Judaism the welcome. How do you welcome people back in to create, after that moment, a significant experience? But for them to come, I believe the Cantors can be the leading force of change in the Jewish people if they stepped into that role as owners, not passively just following. But that's another story. That's my sensibility of it. So when you talk about someone who opened your heart even bigger than where my hands could imagine,
Hmm.
That's huge. Can you tell me
My
what?
guess is we could probably talk.
Say it again.
No, go ahead. I want to hear the question.
No, well, I was. I mean, what can you tell me about love as it relates to your work in Judaism? Because clearly you're a loving man. You know that, which is, I mean, when you take, I love the way you were talking to children a moment ago. You know, it was from a place of curiosity and discovery, and it wasn't about, this is the way it should be. This is what you need to do. This is what you haven't done, but you'll get there. It was more about, this is what we might embody. This is what we might consider. And there's love, which is that intangible. That's the. So yeah, what do you tell me what you think about it?
Yes, I think about as much of a space as I make for love. I'm holding back my gevura, trying to control it all. It's actually there. You should talk to Jack Kessler. I don't know if you talked to him. He has a whole theory of there's a whole Kabbalah of singing. In some ways that the chesed is the root in Kabbalistic thought. The chesed is the root of the person, and then the gevura gives it direction. So you can't just and same way that our vowels are the chesed. We can't interrupt that flow, but we can give consonants to give them direction.
Oh, that's nice.
So he has a whole. You should get it from him.
I will.
So the question is to talk about love as it relates to my work.
How it informs your work, and if it's like, I mean, I always go to that heart space. We can always go on. So it's like, if you want to, fine. If not, we'll go on. It's cool.
No. I think that the reasons I've stayed and stuck around in Jewish communities have been from people who have made me feel really loved, as well as really important. It's like whatever you can talk about logotherapy. Like they say people suffer from a lack of purpose, not from a lack of, where Freud would say they suffer from a lack of pleasure, or as Adler, who says they suffer from a lack of something else, but from a lack of meaning, which I think I suffered from early on, and actually relates deeply to me from the sort of 7 habits way of thinking of things, that there are different places you can center your life. It can be on your relationships, it can be on your spouse, it can be on your job, it can be on your success, it can be on your image. But as my voice teacher said, all of those things, it's like people will, the arts world will welcome you one way and drop you the next. The guidance of God is what will help you stand. And so that's been as someone who has gone to many gods in his life, I feel like, and I feel like that finding the love and support of the God, has been very central to my ability to show up in love for others. And there is a sense of feeling guided, and there is this sense of wanting to make time so that for God to prime that space. That's why the rabbis talk about that we make, in the same way we offer reshit bikurim, we offer our first fruits of our labors, we offer our first fruits of our time for prayer and meditation in the morning. That making that time provides a state of mind to live in truth and to live in service throughout the rest of the day. So I think that love is at the heart of it, and I also think that my own personality, I'm just interested in questions of gevura, of where that should be directed. I'm, as much as I'm a chassid and I am a misnagid at the same time. Like, I need and love and desire the love of God. I think it's so important, and I don't think it's a carte blanche, So those are the kind of things I deal with.
Wonderful. Boy, I hope I'm so inspired to know that you're like the next generation of Cantor. I came into the Cantor in late '70s, listening more like observing the European cantors, who were just men, noble men at that time, who really felt the dignity of their calling, and for the most part, uh, their music spoke to what that represented in the world, and the way they dealt with each other spoke to to um, spoke to what they believed. But it
Mm-hmm.
really
Their
wasn't.
place. It spoke to their place in the world.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, yeah, and so, uh, but there's such a wider conversation I hear in your, in this, this great balance you talk about between your head and your heart. That is so much needed. It's being called for, I think. So, all right, this is really good. All right, so let's see if we can go back on the track, back to the chronological piece. So there you were. Um, you had incredible. I'm going back to the musical cello slash theatrical experiences in high school, William and Mary, and then at the end of William and Mary, you just clarify that piece for me. You had
The end of William. So I also want to answer this. I also wanted to put a bit of a time boundary because I have to go eat lunch and then go to a meeting.
Please.
But I'm happy to do this again because this is you're getting me talking about the future of the Cantor. I can dork out about this for like 5 hours.
I'm excited. Thank you.
So I'll answer this and then I'll put a little bow on the end of it.
Good.
So I came to the end of. So can you repeat the question? I think I kind of answered about like the going off to tutorial school. But I'm trying to think what
I guess. All right. So let's do this. Yes, you did. You spoke about. All right. So tell me about how many years have you been out of cantorial school?
I've been out 2 years.
2 years. All right. So the rubber met the road. So there you were. You had all of these very powerful training and experiences and mentors, and now you're in the congregation. So let's see if we could put a little bow on it. What do you see is being called for the Jewish people? What do you see? I mean, notwithstanding the model that currently exists, and this can be off camera if you wish, if it's easier for you.
No, this is fine on camera.
Yeah, but my thinking is like, what do you see out there? What's being called for, and how do you think, where does your work fit in? How could it make a difference? Which it clearly does, but how do you see it making a difference?
Coming out into the congregational world, I see a lot of people who are extremely successful, at least to themselves, in every other aspect of their lives. And they're professionals. I'm in DC. They're lawyers, they're doctors, they're all sorts of things. And their kids have the same pressure to be all this. On the one area of their life where they don't feel competent is Judaism. And there's a desire in this world to act with meaning and principle and purpose, and to be able to have meaningful and deep relationships, which we also find that electronics sometimes take us out of, because we're trying. My profile must be nice. Do I have to be nice? I don't know. So I feel that there is absolutely a desire for authenticity, a desire for a feeling of competence, and desire for a spiritual connection with God, with the universe. A lot of people look for in different places. I feel like the witness of Cantors specifically, but not exclusively, certainly, is that the Masorah of the Cantor is bringing a message closer through a way that gets you closer to home. The temple service was silent until King David. It was, God forbid we should do any magic. We're going to manipulate God into getting us stuff, which is good. Don't manipulate God into getting you stuff because you're not getting it. But David's innovation was, he used things that were going to reach people's hearts. Music reaches people's hearts. The question is, what do you do after you made the music? What are you gonna do after you've opened their hearts up? Because music is a mystical thing. It's gonna bring you into love. It's gonna bring you into ecstasy. It's gonna bring you into all this stuff. But what do you do after that? Genesis 4, the first story of music. Cain's descendants invent musical instruments. Their society, which has lots of other great stuff. It's got animal husbandry. It's got swords and metallurgy, and flocks and tents and all that good stuff. And at the end of it, it has violent gangster rap. Not the same thing. Pache rap, which is a great form for expressing stuff. But it's, Neshe lemech shma'an koli, Ki ishati kafitzi, vayele lechaburati. I've killed a boy for, killed a man for wounding me, even a boy for bruising me. Im shivatayim yukam kayim v'lemech shiv'im v'shiv'ah. At the end of the civilization, if it's just music, you could have lots of values come out of that. The Cantor has a tool to teach Torah. It is a deep tool, which is music. And sort of more unique witness of Chazanim is being able to express what words mean to them through, and not just through their authentic experience of God, through nusach, through the musical palette of the Jewish music traditions. It's this expression of the self's relationship to God through music that I think is really what Chazanim really had to offer, right? It's our Yerusha through, from Aharon HaKohen down through the Levites in the temples, and, Book of Chronicles. I have a whole theology of Chazanim. It's it's my spiel. But, people want something that's real. They want real life. There's so much fake out there. They expect it. But when someone is real, they get that. They get that. They get that they can relate to you living in your truth. Whatever it is. God willing, we should live in a good truth. It's people are very, very attracted to people who live in their truth. It could be a hard truth or a bad truth. But we need people who are willing to live honestly and spiritually. And I think that Chazanim have a unique opportunity to draw on the cultural depths of chant traditions, and to draw on their own relationship with Kadosh Baruch Hu and with Torah, and make that manifest through their art and their teaching and their truth. So,
thank you.
That's the story.
Man, you're the bomb, baby. We are so lucky. I am so lucky. I just happened to stop by a video on JTS's website, which led me back to you, dude. We got to get you up in front of the Cantor a little more. I mean, you're like, I love your singular passion and voice. It's very, very, it's needed.
Thank you. It's a very eight ratzon for Chazanim. I feel like we're in a time. And I'll send you. I gave a Dvar Torah to the. What's your email again?
It's KennethBCohen@gmail.
Kenneth B. Cohen.
Or CantorCan at AOL, old school.
Oh, CantorCan. Oh, got it. CantorCan at AOL. I'm gonna send it there. I gave a sermon at the CA convention.
I'm sorry I missed it.
Sending it to you. This is a really important time for the Cantor. I feel like it's a make or break moment for the brand. Because, and especially the kids who are in school right now, just because if you look at the CA, this is a longer conversation.
To be continued.
But, and we should have it. But you can read my, let's make another time, email, and we should do another one of these later.
Thank you so much. This was an honor.
It's honor's all mine. You're like scratching the geek part of my back, so I'm happy to purr.
Well, you're scratching my passion, so thank you.
My pleasure.
All right. Have a
great one, Shana Tova, and get me over email. We'll do another one.
Kol Tuv, and thank you again.
My pleasure. Ciao.
Bye-bye.